Well, hey there, Jen. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. I'm so excited to have you and to share you and your story with our guests. So, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. As she mentioned, I am Jen Hirst and I am a sober coach. Mother of two, I live in northern Minnesota and I've been sober for 11 and a half years. And I coach women on not only how to boost your confidence in sobriety, but also implementing habits from the get go to have you feeling your best throughout this process. And so my story goes into uh, I really like to say no one is off limits. I didn't look like your typical, if we use the term alcoholic or someone who has a problem, I don't really have pictures of me passed out or in bed. I did my drinking alone. And from the looks of it, if you go to my Instagram page, it looks like I have it all together. It wouldn't look like I have a problem. I was really good at hiding it. And if we go on a spectrum, I was one of the more severe cases where I didn't know if I had days left to live. It was how far I took it and how much I wanted to make something work that just wasn't supposed to. And my background is I was raised in a great family, as I'm sure many of you are. My parents rarely drank. I got good grades. And so I didn't fit the typical mold of someone who would be struggling with alcohol. But I think, especially for me, I used it to manage my anxiety. It went from pain, from heartbreak. And I only learned that by doing a usage history. If no one's ever done that, it was really eye-opening. I encourage everybody to do that, where I kind of pinpointed where my drinking went from fun, quote unquote fun, to using it to manage an emotion or using it to escape. And that started when my second boyfriend wanted to go on a break. And so that implemented the seed that I could take away any hard feeling by drinking. I never had to feel fear. I never had to feel sadness. I never had to feel, just anxious in social situations. And so it wasn't like I was addicted right off the gate. Going through my history, it was about 10 years of where I first started to escape and abuse it to when I actually got sober. And so this is why alcohol is so tricky. It's because often you wake up and you don't even realize what's happened and how you got here until you kind of back it up and kind of go through your story and figure it all out and how you used it to manage feelings, how that increased my anxiety. And then I would drink because I was anxious, and I was anxious because I drank. And so I kept pushing it and pushing it, got worse and worse, and I got many consequences. I've had 2 DWIs. Yeah, I was laid off from my job. I got my car taken away. I was drinking other forms of alcohol like mouthwash, rubbing alcohol to reduce the shame that I felt from walking into a liquor store. I was trying everything that I could to hide it. And it was really in the year leading up to my wedding where kind of everything came about. I was working full time, doing freelance full time, and I was crippling with anxiety. And so it was really in the day after my wedding, I kind of collapsed and began the 1.5 year journey of actively seeking sobriety. And I'm super stubborn. If you tell me something that I can't do, I'm going to prove to you that I can do it. And I couldn't do this, and I didn't know why. I would have certain milestones like 30 days. And, I don't even think I reached 60 days in that 1.5 year journey, but it was trying things out and seeing what worked. I have been to 3 inpatients. I've been to 8 outpatients. I've gotten a therapist. I've gotten a psychiatrist. I've been to jail. I've been to house arrest. I've been to all of these things, but I kept having to push it until I was finally done. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a home. My marriage was on the verge of divorce. I had no money, and I didn't know if I was going to wake up the next day. And so it was in detox where I was going for the second time that I kind of had an out of body experience. And maybe your listeners have this click moment, which I always refer to. We kind of wake up and everything becomes clear. And I didn't want to drink anymore. And I just stopped fighting it. And I can't say that everything was perfect, but I had so much stuff to clean up. I had court the next day. I didn't have any money. I was homeless. I was all of this, but I just told myself, as long as you don't drink, you can't make this any worse. And I didn't know what my life was going to be like. I didn't know how I was going to clean up the mess that I created, but I just kept focusing on the next right thing. And it's amazing that even with all this stuff that I had to do, get a parole officer, get my license back, all of this stuff, get a job, like everything, it was so much easier when I accepted it and I was ready to do this. And I didn't have to hide anything. I didn't have to manage the lies that I was keeping. And it was like this huge weight. And can also say that no one believed me when I got sober. How were they supposed to know that this time was going to be different? So it took them, and my husband actually did a podcast a couple months ago, that it took him almost a couple years to actually trust me again. So I didn't try to persuade them. I just showed up and I walked the talk. I went to my meetings. I got my sponsor. I did my outpatient. I did this. I did that. I did this. And it's amazing what can happen when you're sober, that all I was doing was not consuming this one thing. And in turn, I got so much back. I was able to rebuild my life. Within 4 months, we found out we were pregnant with my first son, which is what I've always dreamt about. And we couldn't have kids because I couldn't even take care of myself. And so my drinking was preventing us from even doing that. And the fact that my body could recover enough to produce a life just blew me away. And so from that moment forward, I wanted to treat it with respect. It was, and my son, who was born right before my 1 year sober-versary, because he was a preemie, he was the greatest gift to come from my sobriety, of something to look forward to. I'm not saying everybody go out and get pregnant, but it was just one of the miracles that can happen when you start treating your body with some respect. And within 4 months, I got a job back in my field. Within 6 months, I was promoted. Within a year, less than a year, my son was born. Within a year and a half, we got our first house, and all of these good things started happening. And I'm not saying life was perfect, but I was living it. I was actually living it, and I was able to notice all the good things that were happening. And so from that moment forward, I've been in graphic design, and I never shared about my sobriety. And it was when I became a Beachbody coach, if anybody is familiar with that, which is something completely out of the ordinary. One of those things is to share your story, which I did not do. I did not share anything. I actually didn't even think anybody cared about my sobriety. I was really living a dry drunk lifestyle. I didn't share about it. I didn't think anybody cared. I felt like I had no friends. And this was for about 4 years. I lived in the sober closet. And part of that is sharing your story if you become a coach. So within a couple weeks of me starting that, feeling uncomfortable, putting myself out there, I thought it was time to come out of the sober closet. And so I have 2 recovery dates. I have April 24th of 2013, which is my sober date. And I have September 7th of 2017, which was the day I came out of the closet, which also changed my life, because from that moment forward, it led me over the course of a few years to realize I don't think I'm supposed to help women lose weight. I think I'm supposed to help them get sober. Something that I'm doing is working, from workouts to reading to water, like all of that stuff. What I'm doing is working, and women want to know about it because they're struggling. So I started getting in my DMs, and slowly but surely, stars started to align, and it became clear, like, this is what I was meant for. And so I started coaching private clients while still having a full-time job with 2 kids under 3, trying to make it work. I then wanted to go into group coaching, because that's like the magic of sobriety, is community, is we all help and support each other. You have to have a sober community. That is hands down non-negotiable. You gotta be with other women who are also doing the same thing as you, who can lift you up in a society that pushes alcohol. And we all do this thing together. We all get sober together. We all support each other, and we all focus on taking care of ourselves in this process. And so those groups took off, and then in turn grew my membership, and it's just kind of dominoed from there. And that's kind of how I got to where I am today, in a nutshell. A little bit.
Wow, Jen, thank you so much for sharing all of that in such a vulnerable way. And you're so right what you said, that, where the magic really happens is when we begin to come out of the closet, as you said. Now, not everybody's designed for openly sharing publicly about all of the things, and that's not necessary. But if you can find a space, whether it's recovery meetings or in like, groups that you feel comfortable with, or even with just a trusted friend or family member, sharing those parts of yourself is really, really an important process. And also, again, like you don't have to write a book or start a blog about all your transgressions or whatever, but find some way to be a resource and to share the magic and the hope that comes in recovery, because that is truly how it works, right? That's what we learn, that when other people hear, about you or me or whoever, and they're like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Like, how did you stop? Like, I knew you, like you were like falling down drunk or whatever. And like, how did you stop? So
Yeah.
that's how the message of hope gets spread. And like, we let other women know, like, actually, it is possible to change your life.
Hmm.
And it's not actually hard. I mean, it's very simple. This is very, very simple stuff. It's not always easy, but it is simple. So thank you so much for sharing, because that's what it's all about. And I appreciate that. Um, I love how you really talked about the transformation, really, that came from not just not drinking. I mean, obviously, if substances are part of your problem, then not drinking and using is going to be the first step and probably the most critical part. But the transformation comes when we start to combine and like layer on all of these other things that build like a complete package in tiny little steps, like, so tiny little increments we add in, we layer on these tools that lead to the big transformation, right? So from 2000, I think you said 13 maybe,
Hmm.
all the way until now, I mean, you started putting in these little things, little tiny things over time, and we think that's stupid. Like, ugh, what does drinking water have to do with anything? This is ridiculous. But like, and you add that every single day and you never deviate. And then all of a sudden now, like a year later, you have clear skin and you have, healthy nails, and your hair is growing, and your digestive tract is working properly, all because you followed that one tiny little thing, and probably a bunch of other stuff too. So
Hmm.
that's how it works, when we do those same tiny things every single day, right?
Yeah, and you just continue to work at it. And things that we may sound just, like gratitude, that's one of my habits. And yeah, water. But once you learn the science behind it and how important it is, especially for sobriety, where, take for instance, gratitude, where especially me going into it, I'm like, come on, this is such a waste of time. But then, especially in sobriety, I was very negative in the first 4 to 5 years of having this negative mindset, glass half empty sort of mood. And I think if we can sit in there, we can think that sobriety is not worth it, that it's boring, that there's no good can come from it. No one's ever going to like me. I have no friends. It's not fun. But gratitude really rewires your brain. And and it's hard. I mean, for me, it was really hard. Maybe for others, it's really easy. For me, I had to actually Google, what do you be grateful for? I have no idea. And I'm like, it's easy to say your health, your family, food, but I noticed a big difference is when I got specific. And Rachel Hollis came out. If you don't know her, she has a podcast, she has books. I was into her when she came out, went to her conference, changed my life. And she has this Start Today journal where she listed 5 things she's grateful for from the past 24 hours. And when I started doing that, when I really got specific and I had to do that every single day, that is where everything started changing. And not overnight, it's really over time, making it a small habit every single morning, or whether it's at night, you end cap your day or you start your day with it. I always recommend starting your day with it. And you look back and you're like, what went well? And it could be the smallest little things. And knowing that you have to do that every single day, what good came from yesterday? What went well? Instead of always thinking what went wrong, this and this, they said this. It's like, man, I was really excited that Walmart had one bag of Skinny Pop left. Because if that didn't happen, I would be pissed. I'd be upset. I mean, again, I'm not going to die. But noticing those little things, those little signs that we miss when we're drinking, then knowing you have to do it, you're going to be on the lookout to find those things every single day and be like, I need to make a mental note to remember that for tomorrow. Oh my God. it's 20 degrees in Minnesota. That's so nice. The sun is out, or my dog is feeling better, or a fresh cup of coffee from Starbucks. Just those things can just, again, rewire our brain to feel happier and more solidified in this decision that we've made. That was just one,
I
but
couldn't
yeah.
agree with you more. And that is actually a practice that I have been, I think, involved in since the beginning, probably, but have gotten so much better at over time, right? So over particularly the last 10 years. But you're right. Like, I also can relate to being I mean, I was never necessarily a negative person. Maybe I was. Maybe other people would say that. But I think I was very so self-centered. That is the root of our problem. And that self-centeredness always came out with I like, oh my God, like I have too much to do. Like, how am I gonna get this done? Like, I have to do this and this and this and this. And I was like always overwhelmed because I was just constantly listing out all of this stuff in like a negative connotation, right? As if it was like they were bad things. But
Mhm,
really, well, two things happened. One, I got sober in AA, so like I was heavily involved for a long time, and I had a really good. My second sponsor, I chose her because she was a super really tough woman. Like I needed at that stage in my recovery, I needed a very strong, tough woman because
mhm,
that's just where I was. And so I remember calling her and I was like I had 3 kids in 4 years, right? So like you had 6 months sober, I got pregnant with my first kid, then I had 3 kids in 4 years. So I was raising these babies and it was always just a lot. And sitting in the parking lot of the gym where we, by the way, also went to preschool and we were on the swim team and like we spent the 2 hours a day there, right? So it was this privileged, amazing, wonderful thing. And I'm like crying the blues because I didn't know how I was going to get all of this stuff done. And like, and I'm telling her, I'm listening it out. And she said, stop doing that. Stop listing out all of those things like that because now you've probably told me, you probably told your mom, you probably called your husband, you told your friend at the gym. Like you've said that all like 6 or 7 times. Well, no wonder you feel overwhelmed. No wonder
mhm,
your brain is flooding with cortisol. You have to stop that and start just saying, what do I need to do next?
mhm.
What is the next thing? Take your groceries home and unload them and then go pick up your kid. Like, okay, and so when it is so simple, right? Like this is a simple concept, and I was actually pissed off at her because I'm like, no, you don't get it. But she did get it. She did get it because she was
No.
doing the same things. And I learned like she's so right. And I needed to just stop the self-centered wheel, right? And
Mhm,
slow down because all of those things are luxury problems, right? These are all luxury problems that I'm dealing with instead of saying, I get to go home and put my groceries away in a warm house that has air conditioning and heat and a refrigerator and 4 bedrooms. And then I get to go pick up my kids at a preschool that I get to send them to because we have money for that. You see what I'm saying? So,
mhm.
like, yeah, like when you start to change your perspective, but for me, I had to have somebody really teach me that, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, AA
Mhm,
did it for me too because we talk about inventory, just like you said, right? We take that
mhm,
really good inventory, and it says even in the big book that inventory isn't only supposed to be in red. You're
mhm,
supposed to have things in the black. Where's the good? Well,
mhm.
you know what? I showed up on time to work today. And these seem like stupid things, but they're not stupid when you've been living a lifestyle where you couldn't even get out of bed, or you couldn't show up for things, or you said lies all the time. So, these
Or
are
even driving your kids, the luxury of being able to drive,
yes, in a
having a
vehicle,
license.
right?
Ah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I loved doing that inventory part. Was what really helped me was what looking at what my part was in it.
Hmm.
How was I like dishonest? Like, what didn't I say? And I was like, oh man, turning the tables. I'm like, ah, because we can find so much resentment at this and this and this. It's like, well, what was my part in this? And that's, I felt like, was really helpful for me going through that as well, if
That
anyone
is the
has.
most important part. And I feel
Yeah.
like, and frankly, just an overarching theme of personal responsibility, I believe, is a huge part of the missing link in our society today with all people and why we have such a crisis for many people, especially young people, because they aren't being taught those kinds of things for a variety of reasons, right? And even adults, like, so then people just constantly want to point the finger. We want to point the finger, but there's always our part, always in
Hmm.
everything, even good or bad, right? And so,
Hmm.
like even when my kids who are older now, like, they would come home and say like they're having this friendship problem or this teacher thing and especially if it was a friend thing and it was a conflict, and I'd say, well, what was your part in that? what did you say first? Well, I didn't say it. I'm like, well, let's back it up. Like, why did she say that to you? What did you
Mm-hmm.
say? You know, because, and it's not to shame or blame anybody, but it's to help highlight that we all are having a part. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if you get pulled over because you were speeding and you went past a speed trap, the guy pulls you over. It's not because he's being a jerk. It's because he said you were speeding, which is,
Yeah.
by the way, against the law. So you got caught doing something that was against the law. That's your fault. It's not he's a jerk. It's not he doesn't like white guys and black cars or whatever. Like, it's because you were speeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to, it's so easy to blame other people for our problems, but it's
None of
so
us like
hard to be like, I know. No,
it. We
it's
don't
not
like
fun.
that.
No,
So,
it's
so
everybody else's problem. It's not mine.
absolutely. So I love it. So already we've highlighted two really important things that I think are super critical skills that we need to layer on when we're starting to build the confidence and emotional sobriety, and that is gratitude. The other part about gratitude I wanted to just mention is Ann Voskamp's book, 1000 Gifts. And if you haven't read it, it's a little tiny book. It's got a bird's nest on the front with like a blue bird. Ann Voskamp is a beautiful Christian woman. She wrote this amazing book about, she has like all these kids on like a homestead, you know, and she just talked about, her friend challenged her to write down 1000 things she was grateful for or whatever. So she started writing stuff down. So she wrote this whole
1,000.
book about it, right?
Wow.
And she shares simple stories like, you know, she's got all these kids and and she's doing you know, she's in the kitchen and they're fighting and blah 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 behind her, and she's starting to feel it, right? She's starting to feel like, oh, here we go. And then what she immediately does is she stops herself and she's washing her dishes, and she's looking out her window, and she's like, you know, thank you so much for for these kids. Thank you so much for the fact that we have a table they can sit around and fight at. Thank you for these dishes that I get to wash because I have this beautiful life. So, and then immediately her whole body would like start to shift and slow down, and she could feel that disengagement of emotion, right? So that is the
Yes.
science. I'm not a scientist, but that is a physical response to an activity that you can literally do privately. Nobody even has to know you're doing it. That's going to change the entire way that you feel, and then likely the way you respond.
Yeah,
So
that's
just
so
today,
crazy.
and
Yeah.
the second thing we talked about was personal responsibility, which I think is just so huge and a missing link. And when we get really good at this in sobriety, and maybe you work with your clients on this, like when you start to really own that, like, what about this situation is bothering me? You know, like, I'm in this conflict and I'm feeling this thing, and that my husband's coming at me, and he's coming at me, he's coming at me, and he's like, okay, well, maybe he is coming at you, but like, why is that bothering you? Like, why do you
Mm-hmm.
care? Like, why are you getting? Well, maybe it's because I feel like my security is being threatened, or I'm not valuable, or I'm being disrespected. You know, like, what about it is bothering you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because people are allowed to have emotions around this. They're allowed to be mad. They're allowed to be sad. They're allowed to be, you know, all the things. But
Mm-hmm.
why is that bothering you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that
And
I think is super huge.
yeah, and definitely some opportunity for some journal questions because whatever that is happening, if it's affecting you, the same thing could be affect, or he could say the same thing to someone else. That has no effect. And that one key concept that I love that I've been using recently with my clients is just the let them theory of, and I think, gosh, it's just, I mean, working with a client last week of being frustrated over a partner and he's doing this and I'm like, go, you guys, listen to Mel Robbins' Let Them Theory. Go buy the book, go listen to it. It's so, so helpful in sobriety of releasing our need to control other people, letting them be who they are, but also let me do whatever I need to do to center myself, find gratitude, and take care of myself. It releases so much anger and frustration over and offers us peace when we release the need to try to control other people. Then we invite the opportunity for peace, time and space. Like all of that stuff can come when we just use two simple words. It's so, so helpful for me and my clients.
I'm reading it right now, and it's like all I can talk about. I feel like I've been doing that work for about 10 years, though. I've really been
Yeah.
doing it like for myself, and it just gets better and better and better and better. But now reading it, like reading her actual words, gosh, it's just like freaking life changing. So definitely get Mel Robbins' book, Let Them, listen to her podcast, whatever you need to do to connect with that theory, because it is freeing. It is the key to freedom and
Mm-hmm.
peace, truly. Because truly, like again, like everybody around us in our country, in our homes, or whatever, they're allowed to do and be who they want to be. Now, it's not without consequence. nothing is, we all have consequences, good and bad, for everything that we do. But
Hmm.
you get to be whatever you want to be. That doesn't mean you will have every single benefit, or that people won't want to, not be your friend. But you still get to do it.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
people get that confused, I think, right? They get
Yeah.
confused, like, but I'm this thing, and I want to be or believe this or have this feeling, but then everybody else is going to just embrace that, and I'm like, no, that's not. They're not mutually exclusive. It's just you do get to do that, but there are always consequences for our choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I also like to differentiate, how the let them theory is different than boundaries, how they're kind of similar, but also how they're different, which I know she doesn't go into the book, but when something disrupts your well-being, when someone disrupt or disrespects you, that is the time to not just let them, right? We're not going to let people walk all over us, but also that's the opportunity to set a boundary and to stick up for yourself of what you will and will not accept. So let them is kind of passive, and and the boundaries is very active. But you can use them in conjunction with each other as you go about this to again find peace, but also be assertive with yourself and communicate what you need, which then in turn gets your needs met, teaches other people how to treat you, but also allows them to have their own journey and be who they are while you're also showing yourself and doing the same for you.
Totally agree with you, and I think that I'm so glad you brought that up. It's a great topic. I would love to just say more a little bit. I want us to say a little bit more about that because I think that it is confusing. We hear
Mm-hmm.
things like let them, but I do think in the beginning of the book, and I'm just still in the beginning, she talks about that a little bit. She doesn't use the word boundary, but that's why she brings in the let me
Mm-hmm.
piece, right? So and I was just having this conversation earlier today, and I said, we let them do whatever. Like if our spouse wants to be mad or this or that, like we can let them do that and we can carry on with our lives and do that. No, but then if something crosses over to like personal criticism or someone's really, kind of personally attacking you or threatening you or doing other things, that's when you do need to say, like, then let me speak up and say, actually, that's not acceptable. You've
Mm-hmm.
crossed the line here. So, yes, we can let them have their feelings, but we can also let ourselves say, actually, that's not going to work for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's so
Mm-hmm.
critical, right? And so boundaries is like that's another step, right? That's another piece of this puzzle on like how we're building emotional sobriety. And I'd love to hear, like, how are you working with your clients to teach them boundaries?
Yeah. Well, honestly, looking at different areas where you can have boundaries. I mean, a lot of the boundaries we have is with ourselves and where you put yourself, what time you choose to leave, retreating to the bedroom if something's bothering you. It can be with other people, it could be with your time, event, like all of these different areas. But I like to help women work through the boundaries by having like a 5-step process of, identifying an area in your life that's causing you some problems that you want to change, and then working through them of, okay, we have this, then let's figure out the dialogue. Here are some different scenarios of whether you use the I statement, and then how to communicate it. Like when we're communicating our boundaries, how to have, our body posture, not over describing or simplifying our boundaries, and then making sure we repeat them and that we follow through on them. Because with every boundary that you set, there's going to be a consequence of if that boundary is broken, will be the consequence. So just navigating that, giving them a worksheet to figure that out, like plan it out. Because I think that's the whole key to sobriety, is just to have a plan to what is bothering me. Let's write out, how can I communicate this? What's going to be the consequence? And what is the action that I'm going to take? Because that's exactly what boundaries are. It's the action that you take, not someone else. It's what you are going to do. And then it's up to me to withhold it. And so I like to always tell clients, because I'm Minnesota nice, and to have it be received better is to do like a compliment boundary sandwich, where you say something nice to the person to kind of introduce the boundary. Then you state what the boundary is, and then you leave it with something positive. So, hey, honey, I really enjoy spending some time with you and reconnecting and watching a movie together on Friday night. What I really need is, because I'm doing this challenge, I really need to have the alcohol out of the home. So I was seeing, would you be okay if we can keep the alcohol in the garage for right now until I feel a little bit more comfortable? But I am so excited to, and then just leave it with something positive. That makes them, the receiver, more apt to be okay. And not like it's up to them. It's not our responsibility with how they receive our boundary, but it's just a nicer way to kind of communicate it as people pleasers for them, for us to get the confidence to share it. So,
I
yeah.
love that example. Thank you so much. And I was just made me think about holidays too. Like, and I think a lot of times women that I've run across when I talk about this concept in any of my work is sometimes I feel like they don't even feel like they're allowed to do that. Like, and so like we need to help them understand that, to give them permission. Like they need to give themselves permission to create these boundaries. So not only do they not really know what that is, but they're not even like, ooh, like I can't imagine it's like saying that to my mom or whatever, but I'm like, okay, and we have to be very cautious. We're not saying you should be a jerk, you don't call someone a name or like, it's very basic, just like you just said. And then also being willing to accept on the other side that that person might be upset about that. They might be
Mm-hmm.
angry, they might be sad, they might be disappointed. There might be a feeling that comes up for that other person because you set a boundary, but it's not you that's causing it because that's on them. That's not your fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and then also realizing they're allowed to have. Made me think of the holidays, right? So a lot of people I was working with, you just struggle. Like I think it's just a real struggle for most of us, especially if you're a parent, like with a lot of activities, a lot of family stuff, and like traveling if you have family out of town, and so sometimes this is really hard to be able to decide like I don't really want to do this thing anymore. Like I don't want to go out on Christmas Day. Like it's just and so you struggle, maybe do it a couple years, and then you build a resentment because now you're like, I feel pissed off. But so being able to say like, hey, mom, dad, I love spending time with you guys. It's so fun. Like I love our traditions and all. I also am really excited about starting my own with my family and my kids, and like I really want them to be able to wake up in their own home. And so we really decided that we're gonna create this new kind of family tradition for us and spend like a couple hours, and then we'll come over a little bit later, maybe like 2 o'clock or something. So because we really do want to spend time with you. So
Yes.
it's like,
Perfect.
like you've been able
Perfect.
to you've been able to say like, you're valuable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also valuable and I'm doing this. And then, but we still really want to do it. So it's not like you're saying, now sometimes you might be saying I'm not going to come, but like if you can figure out a way to make everybody get a little bit of the pie, then that works the best. But it's worse when we just let that stuff continue on when it's hurting us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
And
drinking
like you,
like it's still going to be hurtful to you if you're doing something that is really not aligned with your values.
yeah, and like you said, when we don't set boundaries, that builds resentment, and resentment is not a good place to be in sobriety. And when that stuff festers, we get upset, we get angry, and then that can push us to the F it button. So we don't want that. But like you said, there can be a nice way to say it. How we say it matters. We don't have to explain everything. We keep it simple. We smile. We write it down if that helps, and we communicate it, and then we follow through. But again, like you said, we are not responsible for how someone receives that. That's where we can apply the let them theory. If they are upset by the boundaries that you set, it's even more reason to set those boundaries in the first place. And so shame and guilt can be a normal symptom after we set a boundary. That's normal, but don't let that negate you from sticking up for yourself, because you matter, your needs matter. And the more that you can gather up the confidence, so whether that's to go for a workout before you do it, say some affirmations to yourself, take a deep breath and look at yourself in the mirror, just say, you know what? I'm not going to die. I can freaking do this. And then go and set it. And then again, let it go. However they receive it, it's not your responsibility, but all that's required of you is to set the boundary in the first place.
Yeah. So I know that one of your big areas of interest and focus is a lot around like nutrition and wellness and movement, and all of those things are such important layers as well. And we probably could spend another 2 hours talking additionally about all that stuff. But I'm curious about kind of the stuff that we've already said, and then just bringing in that new layer of like, how do we? You use the word respect your body, which I love
Mm-hmm.
that. Because I think first, when we're active addiction, when we were in active addiction, we're doing the opposite of that. Like, right? Like we don't think about it because we're not thinking about it. But like when you're drinking and doing drugs, like you're literally ingesting poison, like you're
Hmm.
poisoning, right? And so that's clearly not a way to respect your body, but we're certainly not thinking about that because we don't, because it's too much for us. We don't want to think about what we're doing. But now, as like sober people, and maybe this is the first time you're ever doing that. Maybe you've never been taught about nutrition. Maybe you really have zero idea like how to even get started, or you weren't raised in a family that that valued that. And that's okay. Everyone has to start somewhere. And so I'm curious about like kind of the baby steps into some of that, like whether you've been a health nut for your whole life or you're kind of just baby stepping into it. Like how can we bring these other concepts in, like around gratitude even, and around personal responsibility for sure, and then even boundaries too, like at layering on the sort of nutrition and movement aspect of physical health into our emotional sobriety recovery. Like what do you do with your clients with that?
Yeah, and maybe I have my clients bite off more than they can chew, but I really feel like the women that join me want a challenge. And I think when you have something and you have these habits, you have these systems set in place, I think having this challenge helps fill the time. It gives us structure, a sense of accomplishment, and they also help boost our dopamine. And so it's not something that's unachievable. It's definitely achievable, but you get to choose kind of what path you take. And so I would say if you're interested in nutrition, now that's not one of my habits, but of course, drinking water is a little bit part of nutrition and staying hydrated. But if you're interested in nutrition, especially in sobriety, whether you're new to sobriety or a few years in, I think one of the biggest concerns that I receive in my groups is sugar cravings, is the all the amounts that I can't get a hold of my sugar, which is totally normal. I get it. I like to be realistic with the women. Instead of taking something away, I always ask, what can we add? And the biggest thing that we can add, especially for women who are, in your 30s and 40s, 50s, 60s, is to add protein. Protein helps reduce our sugar cravings. It helps manage our blood sugar. And so really having that before your trigger hour, before that witching hour, so around 3 p.m. usually, is to have a really rich protein snack. So cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, chomp stick, just anything with some protein along with a healthy fat is going to be really, really helpful. And whether it's movement, can I get out for a 10-minute walk? Adding in and maybe not biting off and doing all of these things at once, but it's for this week or for the next couple weeks. Can I go for a 10-minute walk? Can I write and think of 3 things and get a gratitude journal, 3 things that I'm grateful for from the past 24 hours? Another one of my habits is reading. And I think reading is huge. So whether you're listening to a podcast like this, or whether you're reading a book on personal development or Quit Lit, I think that's imperative and has completely changed my sobriety, completely changed my mindset. So make sure you're reading, maybe 5 pages or 2 pages of Quit Lit, or a personal development book like the Let Them Theory or the 5-Second Rule or You Are a Badass or something like that, something that's going to help you do life better. And that's going to help your mindset. So I think just taking a little bit, not overcommitting yourself, but thinking realistically, what can I accomplish? And what is one thing I could do this week that would help me to feel better? So in my courses, our habits are: number 1, stay sober, drink half your body weight in ounces of water, move your body for 30 minutes a day, read 10 pages of a personal development or Quit Lit book, write 5 things you're grateful for from the past 24 hours, and check into the group. So check into your sober community every single day. And when you can do those things, because again, we have the time, and it doesn't take that much time. When we can stack those habits together, they help you to feel better in sobriety. They help to boost your confidence, boost your self-esteem, and help you to stay sober. And so you can pick and choose what habits you want to do. But if you need some recommendations, I would start there.
I love that so much. Those are all super powerful. And again, sometimes because I know how I am. I'm still like so type A and just like ADHD all over the place. And like I was raised as like an athlete, and I was always very athletic and fit and focused on food. And there's been times when I've been like super focused on it, and then other times when I've not. And then COVID times came and it really hit me hard. Like we had a lot going on. It was a lot of trauma in our home for a sustained period of time. And so I was like not able to focus on that, which was really hard. And so then I was ready to get back into it, and I connected with a woman that's, a personal trainer and like a guru in my world. And, she said like, okay, let's start with, basically she said, like, let's get these habits going. And she said, I want you to drink a gallon of water a day. And I was like, okay. And I had my paper and I'm like, okay, a gallon of water a day. And I'm like, okay.
Hmm.
And she's like, that's it. And I'm like what? Like, no, I'm ready. Like I'm ready, like, to do the thing. She's like, nope, I just want you to do that for like 2 weeks or a week or whatever. And I'm like, oh, like that was so hard for me, right? Because I wanted the 7 things. And
Hmm.
like that's so alcoholic, But sometimes we just have to break it down into smaller pieces, right? And just like, and also it's really important for us to learn how to follow directions, whether it's in your program or a recovery program of any kind. We need to learn how to follow directions from other people, not because they're better than us or that we're not good enough or whatever, but because that's how we change. When we learn to follow the directions of somebody that we've chosen to be our leader in our life in a certain area. And, a lot of times we want to take our will back and be in control and like, but usually doesn't work. So
I know. I
thank you
know.
so
We want
much
to
for your
control.
time. I really appreciate you and
Absolutely.
your story. I love the work you're doing. So if people do want to reach out to you or connect, where do you like people to do that?
I love to hang out on Instagram, and I'm at Jen Lee Hirst. Or you can go to my website at joinlighthousesobriety.com, where I have my 100-day sober journal that you can check out, and then links to membership and my coaching programs if you're interested.
Perfect. I'll make sure they're linked in the show notes below. And again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope our paths cross again soon.
Awesome. Me too. Thanks for having me on.